Ba-da-ba-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. And Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101.
Hey, this is Mike McGinley, Mitch Rose,
Peter Katzis,
Mike Hayes, Tony from APA, Vince Bannon,
Deshaun Healy,
Steve Rennie,
Rick Canny,
Sam Kinkin,
Rob McDurf. Happy to be here on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Hi, I'm Slurpee McGurkin, and I'm here to tell you why you should vote for Promoter 101 to be the supreme leader of the International Federation of Podcasts. Promoter 101 cares about you. We strive to bring you the most intriguing, insightful, and entertaining interviews on a weekly basis, purely out of the goodness of our hearts. Other podcasts make you listen to commercials and sponsorships because, well, let's face it, all they really care about
is money.
Promoter 101 is good for the economy. With all the money people save not buying stuff that other podcasts are selling, they'll be able to buy more concert tickets. That's pretty much the goal, right? Now that's all fine and dandy, but the real reason you should vote for Promoter 101 is that it's hosted by the two most exceptional podcasters in the known universe. With the hard-hitting questions and quick-witted observational humor of Dan Steinberg and the elegant boat shoes and tight-fitting shirts of W. Luke Pierce, Promoter 101 will lead us out of the oppressive grip of podcast monotony and into the light. Vote Promoter 101 for Supreme Leader of the International Federation of Podcasts. But before you do, check us out on Spotify, because we're there now. I'm Slurpee McGurkin, and welcome to Promoter 101.
Welcome, dear friends, to episode 95 of the Promoter 101 podcast.
This week on the Promoter 101 podcast, we've got AEG Presents Bobby Reynolds.
APA's Noel Largess shares her views of the biz.
A war story from Kill the 8 merch companies, Aaron Rosen, and we have a special guest co-host from Nederlander, Jamie Loeb. Welcome to the podcast, Jamie.
Why, thank you. And News of the Week with Luke Pierce from Works Entertainment and Dave Brooks from Billboard and Amplified Media.
It's Barry Dickens from ITB, and I'm on Promoter 101.
Did you know you can pretty much listen to Promoter 101 anywhere, Jamie?
Really? Anywhere?
You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Music. I mean, seriously, pretty much anywhere.
Oh, my goodness. Well, would you, our listening audience, like to tell us something? If so, just reach out to us at steiny@promoter101.net.
Or you can follow us on Twitter. Luke is W. Luke Pierce. I'm at The Jew. The show is Promoters 101 or Promoter 101, whichever you prefer. And Jamie is Jamie Loeb at Twitter.
This is Arielle Hyatt from Cyber PR on the Promoter 101 podcast.
If you've missed any of our past podcasts, don't worry. This week, we've got a classic reissue of episode 52.
This episode features AGI's Nick Storch talking about everything from the moment Ghost is having to King Diamond.
Sean Healy Presents founder and namesake will talk about promoting shows from Phoenix to Seattle.
Plus, the war story comes to us from Fast Eddie Mycone.
And don't forget, you can drop us a review or subscribe or do all the things that Luke, if he were here right now, would be telling you should really do.
Hi, this is Heath Miller.
Becca Leifer.
Ed Mycone.
Derek Dimmenstein.
Jason Kupperman.
Jason Miller.
John Scher.
Marcia Flessick.
Mike Fruitman. Ricardo Bacco.
Peter Schwartz.
Nick Storch.
I'm on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
I'm on Promoter 101.
News of the Week.
Please welcome W. Luke Pierce and Billboard's Dave Brooks.
And it's time for the News of the Week. We are joined this week on Promoter 101 by our good friend from Amplified Magazine and Billboard, Mr. Dave Brooks. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Luke. Glad to be here.
Tell me, what's going on in the world this week? What do you got for us?
The big story this week, UTA is finally in the money. United Talent Agency has sold a big stake in the company to InvestCorp and Public Sector Pension Investment Board, which basically is a fund for the various public employee pensions around the United States. We don't know a lot about the deal, but keep in mind this kind of comes a few years after TPG bought into CAA. WME&W sold a majority to Silver Lake Partners. What's a little different, I think, is those two deals, CAA and WME, they're selling it to funds that really help grow the business. While UTA, this investment from, say, like the pension fund, this is more about a long-term investment for the pension board. So perhaps that's a good thing. Perhaps that means that the investors will be kind of like silent partners and won't get involved in the day-to-day decisions of UTA. But I think more importantly, this just obviously gives UTA the capital it needs to grow and expand as a modern-day agency to compete against CAA, WME, and Paradigm.
What do you think that it says that the money that's buying into UTA is less aligned with other ventures in media spaces? And I'm not saying that TPG with CAA was this big rain capital-esque type of money or, similar to the same thing about Silver Lake, but they had aligned interests in peripheral fields and tech with Silver Lake, and some other businesses with TPG. UTA is being signaled that this is like a complete monetization of equity in UTA by an outside board that's basically just a cash infusion away to a liquidity event for some of the existing stakeholders and shareholders, of which I will note in this that they said that even assistants were going to be benefiting from this, which seems highly unusual in an agency world. But what do you think it says that it's this kind of pension board kind of money and not, some capital that's aligned with entertainment stuff? Is that a knock or reflection on UTA's business and their position right now?
That's a really interesting point. And yes, I did see what you're talking about. They're saying that everybody was going to get a financial benefit from this transaction, including assistants and support staff. They don't really define what that means.
Everybody gets a taste is what they
Yeah. I think you're making a great point. Exactly. Like, we'll say like a Silver Lake Partners, the way they're driving WME with investment and pushing, with acquisitions like UFC, the Miss Universe pageant, even Pro Bowl riders, that's all the strategy, right? Kind of bringing together the talent agency. This UTA deal, it just seems like they're selling an equity stake to these big investment boards, but we're not seeing what's the strategy here from the capital side. Maybe that's what Jeremy Zimmer and some of the partners at UTA want. They want to take investment from somebody that's going to give them the money, that's going to capitalize them, but not kind of get in the way of their vision and how they want to spend the money. Maybe that's the kind of partner they're looking for so that the people who are driving UTA business can also drive how this money is spent.
We know we've got a lot of well-informed listeners in the podcast. It should be pointed out, too, that I'm going to blank on which pension board, but WME Endeavor has taken subsequently since the initial Silver Lake investment and then since the acquisition of IMG that made Silver Lake a majority owner of WME, they've also taken on late-stage pension money. Was it Canada?
Right, yeah. The Canada pension plan put somewhere up in the hundreds of millions of dollars into WME, just as the Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund has invested in WME and the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund. So you're right. It's not just kind of these private equity and groups, but there's also these big funds that are also getting involved. They're just not necessarily in a majority position.
It's interesting we see that. The one agency that I left off here that I just scratched my head about is ICM Partners, which has gone through a capitalization period with, Rivsy Capital coming in and then a subsequent buyback of that. They kind of jettisoned the participation of that and bought the company back for the private share of things. But this does not seem like the kind of trajectory that an agency is going to take when they're taking on an investment of this size in UTA. This seems like a long tail play for them.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be very interesting to see how they spend this money. UTA has already acquired part of Circle. It'll be interesting to see if they acquire actual touring properties like WME and CAA have. And you're right. I think the ball's in the court of ICM. How are they going to react to this move? Because they seem kind of like the natural next competitor in line with UTA. If you look at the Billboard Power 100, the UTA is slightly ranked higher than ICM. So it makes sense that they would want to do something in reaction.
We'll have to stay tuned on that story. What else you got, Dave?
Everybody has heard of the legendary rock club Viper Room. I've been there many times. What we've learned in the last month is that the Viper Room, along with a number of other properties along the Sunset Strip, have been bundled together and sold to a private equity group. Now, we don't know yet what is going to happen to the Viper Room. But, if you look at what's happened to properties like the House of Blues on the Sunset Strip, music venues are kind of seen as the least profitable venture. And that area is such a high area for condos and hotels that they're being knocked down for those type of properties. So I think it'll be interesting to see if the Viper Room survives this acquisition. We don't know a lot about the buyer. It's just an LLC out of Scottsdale calling itself 8850 Sunset, which is just the address. But, the Viper Room obviously has such a rich history. It goes back to the kind of mob days of LA, like, Bugsy Siegel. And, obviously Johnny Depp bought into it in the 90s. It was
you got like River Phoenix stories. I mean, plus all of the poker games. I don't know if you've seen Molly's Game.
Yes.
Detailing the high stakes poker games happening back there too.
Right. Tobey Maguire kind of muscling people around in his poker games. I mean, just so much history for a venue that's really, just a 250 cap venue. So we'll see what happens with this, but I think it's not the best sign for LA music.
I assume this is going to become a high rise of some sort. Like, there's just no way that this thing survives, right? Which is a sad thing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what they did at the House of Blues is basically condos and hotels. And I mean, let's be honest, the Sunset Strip just is not the hot spot in LA anymore, right? I mean, I think the Roxy is a great room, and it's amazing to see like an underplay there. But if you look at where the places around LA that are really happening, it's Hollywood, it's kind of mid-Wilshire, it's even downtown. Sunset Strip, I mean, there's just not a lot going on in that part of town, especially for new music and culture. It's just a lot of small clubs and special nights, and not the Roxy or the Viper Room, but even some like pay-to-play stuff going on. So I think the Sunset Strip might have outlived its prime.
All the hipsters hopped on their fixed gears and headed out to Silver Lake and Echo Park, man.
Yeah, exactly. The East Side is where it seems to be at these days.
What else is going on this week in the news?
I love the story because it's such a head scratcher. Golden Voice has announced the second year of Tropicali Fest in Long Beach, where I live. And they're doing it on the side of the Queen Mary, which is this historic boat. The festival actually takes place next to the Queen Mary. I should say it's on the boat. So anyways, Tropicali is an event with a lot of Spanish language bands. It kind of has a Mexican-American audience. And they do a great job booking all sorts of artists. What's interesting is this year, the festival is being headlined by Morrissey, who, of course, is popular, in all demographics. I think, there's a lot of Mexican-American fans who love Morrissey. But Tropicali, at its heart, is not just a music festival. It's also a celebration of tacos. And if you know anything about Morrissey, he hates meat. And he cancels shows all the time. This is going to be a real interesting thing to watch. It's in November 3rd and 4th. And I mean, look, Morrissey is anchoring this thing down, right? He is the big name. They also have Cardi B, Los Tigres del Norte, some other great acts. But I mean, it seems like a roll of the dice getting Morrissey on stage when you're going to have taco meat in the air.
It's a roll of the dice anytime you buy Morrissey, right? Yeah. I feel like everybody's, at some degree, has got a Morrissey horror story attached to it, So to put him in a place where there's going to be the elements that's going to trigger that guy, you better be finding some sort of insurance or subrogation to limit your exposure on that front of things, because otherwise it's going to come 10 o'clock, get him on stage, nowhere to be found. It's not going to be a good thing. That festival plays out when? This fall?
It's November 3rd and 4th down here in Long Beach.
Are you going to be at it? Are you going to be tasting some tacos?
Oh, I'll be there. I didn't go last year, but I really like this event site. And Tropicali Fest is just very cool with the marketing and the way they put it together. It has a great look, just basically celebrating, Mexican-American culture here in Los Angeles.
Oh, fantastic. One more, bring us home. What else is going on this week?
This last story, I just have such a hard time wrapping my head around this one. James Dolan, of course, the chairman and CEO of Madison Square Garden, has released a song called I Should Have Known that tackles sexual harassment and, victims' rights. And while he doesn't explicitly come out and say it, the song is very likely about his long relationship with Harvey Weinstein.
Obviously, let's draw a line between MSG, Radio City, and Harvey Weinstein and James Dolan. This connection goes back quite a ways, right?
Yeah, they've been friends forever. And recently, Dolan sat on the Weinstein Company's board. But if you really want to hone in on the song, I think what it's talking about is this period of time that began in 2014 when Dolan asked Harvey Weinstein to reboot the Rockettes spring show. Of course, they have the famous Christmas spectacular that happens every year. But the Rockettes have always struggled with a spring-summer content. And so 2014, Dolan brings Weinstein in. They start working on redoing the show. They complete a rework of the show. For whatever reason, creative forces watched the rehearsal of the finalized show and said, this is not ready for prime time. So they delayed it a year. They finally got the show up and out in 2015, and then it was pretty much panned by the critics who just didn't have nice things to say about it. Pretty much been dead from there. Is Dolan dealing with guilt for exposing the Rockettes to Weinstein? I mean, I would not want to be the person who introduced Harvey Weinstein to, dancers.
Anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody, let alone, the Rockettes, which is like an institution. And there was a great article in the New York Daily News with all these blind quotes and anonymous allegations saying the dancers were happy to be ready of the, quote, creepy old man. And they were, quote, relieved he won't be standing in the back of the theater and taking notes in the dark. So it's definitely an interesting way for Dolan to kind of deal with Weinstein. And while, I think it's easy to say, how is that making amends with potentially introducing a predator to all sorts of people? I'm going to reserve judgment on this for Dolan and give him the benefit of the doubt for now. But I think if he really thinks that he is going to turn the chapter on Weinstein, he's going to have to do more. I think I'm just going to give him the benefit of time to actually do more before I make judgment.
And hey, listen, of course they want to get out information about this song and this music. This side project, JD and the Straight Shots, that James Dolan sings in, is interesting and all, but the way that the story read to me felt like this was a publicist handing the story to journalists to write about a particular song. So is it an element of guilt? Is it an element of self-promotion? I don't know what it is to make of it, but I felt very weird even reading that article. And I don't know how it read to you, Dave, but it just felt like one of those stories that I read over and over from artists talking about their singles,
The whole thing is incredibly strange. This whole thing is predicated on the idea that JD and the Straight Shot is actually a good band, or even a worthy band of us talking about it. Anything, right? I mean, there's just so many levels of strange here.
You're right. Are we really caring about James Dolan's band right now? That's what we're talking about. We're spending time talking about it, but it's because it made a headline in Billboard because it was service out there. I mean, this is the band that flies private on Dolan's jet everywhere in between gigs. It's this is, to your point, it is a hilarious premise of which we're building all these conversations on.
In a way, it's a head scratcher that we're still talking to it, but maybe it's also another tip of the hat to Dolan that he's kept his music in the headlines for so long, because if you listen to it and you dive into it, it's really not that great.
Well, I'll have to take a listen to this song. I'm certainly probably not going to spend time listening to the back catalog of JD and the Straight Shots, but nonetheless, an interesting story, an interesting kind of admission of guilt on things, I think, on Dolan's part more than anything. And certainly something that I think a lot of people are going to have to reconcile themselves at some point if you did business with Harvey Weinstein the last 25 years. And I think there's no better place to end on such an interesting story. Got to thank our buddy Dave Brooks from Amplify Magazine and from Billboard for joining us, as always, on Promoter 101. Dave, good to have you, and we're going to have to get drinks soon, man.
You got it, Luke. Absolutely. I look forward to seeing you whenever our paths cross. And
AIBA. Are you doing AIBA? You coming out for night?
I'll be there. I'll be at AIBA, so we'll meet up then.
We're doing it again. Look for Dave Brooks in the news. AIBA again. I'm sure sometimes before that too. But thank you as always, Dave, for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Luke.
Luke and Dave are always just the best at coming up with scoops. And, you can always tell them apart because Luke is the one with the very colorful pants, Jamie.
I've noticed.
Hi, I'm Mitch Rose, co-head of the music department at CAA, and I'm on Promoter 101.
It's everyone's favorite time, the announcement of the Promoter 101 Badass of the Week.
This week, a little shameless self-promotion, as we're very excited to announce this week's Promoter 101 Badass of the Week is going out to Jason Zink. Because he never listens to the podcast, he'll actually never know. But hey, shameless self-promotion for us at Emporium this week.
Congratulations, Jason.
This is Julia Frank from Wizard Promotions in Germany, and we're on Promoter 101.
In our feature interview this week, we've got Bobby Reynolds from AEG Presents.
Las Vegas, Nevada, and I'm hanging out with the king of Vegas, Bobby Reynolds. Welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for coming to Las Vegas.
So we've known each other for a long time, and I've got a very broad view of your epic career from agent to promoter, every coast that this industry offers in the U.S., and now Vegas.
Well, I don't think I put agent on my resume.
Hey, man, QBQ.
Being an intern for Dennis at QBQ for Train Fair, I don't think qualifies as an agent, but I'll take the compliment.
Guy booked some cool acts.
Absolutely. It was great being so young, seeing all that and starting out, watching Metallica tours go out and Billy Joel tours go out and Andrew Dice Clay being the biggest comedian on the planet at the time. It was really, really cool being there.
That's two things. Andrew Dice Clay once sold Madison Square Garden out for 2 nights.
Right.
That's how powerful a comedian was once upon a time.
Right.
Which was unheard of. It's not like now where you got 6 guys that can do that kind of business.
Absolutely right.
There was one.
There was one. I don't think until that time I ever saw a comedian advertised at an arena. I mean, it was just mind-blowing. And graduating high school in New York in 93, I used to burn out those Dice cassette tapes,
Absolutely. QBQ was the precursor to what is now AGI, and essentially is now probably the most premier boutique agency in the world.
Yeah, they are. They have a really solid crew of guys there that have been there for a long time, and they continue to not only come up with new talent to represent, but they have their mainstays.
To say you're not an agent or you weren't, okay, but you could have been, and you definitely were in the door at one of the coolest agencies in the world.
Yeah, I mean, again, at about as low a level as you can get, I was definitely there watching stuff go down and learning about the business for sure.
Okay, so what kicked it over to the promoter side?
Yeah, I mean, I think even while I was out chasing ticket counts and running for lunches and doing those kind of tasks, I kind of liked the promoter side of things more. I would talk to promoters and their assistants and just kind of liked the aspect of really producing the shows, being at all the shows and, the concerts. And that experience is really why I got into this business. And it seemed like promoters had more of that experience day to day.
You switched over sides, basically about 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, so Jim Maloney was one of the guys that I would talk to when I worked at QBQ in his office. And Jim was working at Cellar Door at the time in Virginia and was going down to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina to open up the House of Blues. And I had heard of the House of Blues in Boston and they had Chicago, New Orleans, and LA at the time. And always thought what they were doing was super cool. And Myrtle Beach was going to be their biggest venue to date. So when Jim was going down there, not many people moved from New York City to Myrtle Beach to work in the music business. But I did that. And I did it for a little while. Was with the Myrtle Beach store for about 1.5 years. And then I got, an opportunity that I think really kind of changed my career trajectory was when Kevin Morrow called me and asked me to come out to LA to work in his office and go work for the LA House of Blues, which, at the time was the coolest place in town, the coolest music venue in town, if not the country.
Kevin, of course, being a legend in the industry and what he did for House of Blues. But even before that, another guy that started on the agent side, Falk and Morrow Agency,
right,
which was the original Sky Agency.
That was a little before my time, but I've heard the stories from Kev and sounded like a very interesting place to work.
Toasters and Dance Hall Crashers.
Yeah.
Elise Rogers was an agent there. Some very cool stuff. All right, so now you're in the House of Blues system and part of a national syndicate as a talent buyer.
Yeah, I mean, all the entertainment decisions at a macro level were coming out of LA, and the buyers would bounce their offers off of Kev. Kevin would run a weekly buyer call. Michael Yerke and Sonny Schneidow and Jim Maloney. Mike Krebs joined just a drop after I got there, getting to listen to those guys and how they conducted their business, how they gauged talent, how they cut their deals, and really, probably most importantly, how they communicated with their staff and with the home office in LA. It was really just an eye-opening opportunity. On top of that, being out at night and developing relationships with agents and managers while we're all cutting our teeth and we're all making no money and living in LA and just having a really good time. It was a great thing for my career.
At this moment in time in the industry, independent promoters ruled the universe. They were called the majors at the time because independent promoters were small club kids at that moment, because the big promoters were what we now would call independent promoters, the guys that were doing arena shows in a market, jams, cellar door, pace even, what have you. Those guys were the majors, which is the biggest promoters. They would do the Stone shows in the market, or U2. So at that point, these House of Blues clubs, which were fairly new at that moment, are springing up in these markets and taking on the big major in their market. So to have guys calling like Michael Yerke on this phone call, who's just opened Chicago and is trying to compete with the Vic and the Riv and all the jam shows, this is a massive undertaking. Now it seems a little different looking at history. Like, of course, the House of Blues is going to work in Chicago. But at the time, we were all looking at like, can this work? They bought some really high-end property. You're going to Chicago against jam? Like, that was hitting your head against the wall on a big level. And they were doing this all over the place. New Orleans a little easier, but still real promoters in that market, always. And so they're doing this around the country, and they're getting into these scrap fights in every market, and they continue to do so. They go to Cleveland later and take on Belkin before they became part of the same system. But you've got this all over the country where these guys are picking fights with the biggest promoters in the world.
And I think that kind of goes back to one of my learning experiences. You know, the vibe at the House of Blues, the customer service there, I thought was great. You know, for the most part, people really enjoyed coming to the House of Blues. They bought the cool merchandise. They ate at the venue. I mean, in LA, if you remember, the balcony kind of opened up. The seas parted when the show started. You're sitting in your seat, you look down, you see 1,000 people crowded downstairs. I mean, they were doing things that really no one else was. And that's how House of Blues started to become a brand name. And business-wise, agents and artists recognized that. House of Blues always sounded good, and the food was always good. And as we know, if your catering's good and your sound's good, you're probably going to have a good show. At least the artist's going to think so.
Next level stuff. I mean, you had a couple clubs where the experience was already there. Like the Norva, they had a good thing that they were doing there where they were making acts happy. Seth always had a vibe. They made acts happy. But nationally, you weren't seeing that yet. There's a stage. You're lucky if there's a 4 toilet seat backstage.
You know, a lot of that had to do, looking back, with Kevin coming from the agent world and really, you know, knowing firsthand what was making artists happy and trying to adapt that thought process and those actions to the promoter side of the coin, which, you know, again, on the national level really wasn't being done.
You're with House of Blues, pre-Live Nation, right? This is pre-Clear Channel.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so a couple more jumps. You visited a couple more markets. Where else did you go?
Went to Orlando with House of Blues after leaving L.A., back to work with Jim Maloney.
So Orlando, that's a fight, too, because you're talking about going up against Phantasma, Stoll, JV, huge promoters in that market at the time. Fat Harry is doing shows there, too.
Yeah, and I mean, the Hard Rock wasn't there yet. The Hard Rock in Orlando wasn't there yet. So as far as venues went, I mean, there really wasn't anything that could touch the House of Blues, you know? It was brand new. It was on downtown Disney property. Parking was easy. And just the whole vibe of House of Blues was a really new and fresh thing at that time. So there was certainly competition. But from a size standpoint, just a vibe standpoint, there really wasn't anything that could compete with House of Blues down there at the time.
So by the time you guys opened Orlando, there's enough venues open where there's some critical mass. You guys are getting all the avails, because if you're not getting them, the guy booking Chicago, Michael Yerke, or Sonny in New Orleans is getting it, or Kevin's getting it in LA. Somewhere you guys know it's coming and you guys are having a chance to fight for it.
Yeah, and again, that was my first foray as working for a promoter, and you really realize the power of talking and communicating, and absolutely every single week we would hear what avail Sonny was getting and would proactively look at it for different markets and vice versa.
But the first national promoter was created with that network, so to speak, for the first time, where you saw guys, Graham maybe doing a stadium tour across the whole country pre that, but for the most part, and that would be a special one-off thing for the Stones or Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young or something. It didn't really happen that much. But this moment was a permanent structure that now you had promoters that were on the same team spread out nationally, talking every day.
Yeah, again, hearing those conversations in the embryonic stage, it was just great to be around. Really, really learned a lot. Kind of let myself be a sponge at that time and just hear what all these super smart guys were talking about and how they're doing their thing and how excited they were. You know, guys that had been in the business for a while, how excited they were to be the recipient of all this information, all this data. Not only what avails are there, but what the on-sales were like in the markets, how the show closed, what the walk-up was like, if there were security concerns. It was just so much information that got transferred back and forth, and it was still a small call. There were only a handful of guys on it at the time. And as House of Blues grew, those calls grew. I left House of Blues definitely before the Live Nation acquisition, but skipping forward now, even being on AEG phone calls, and I'm sure Live Nation is the same, if not even more cumbersome. There's a lot of people on it, There's a lot of people, and it's impossible to let everyone have a few minutes. You'd be on the call for hours. It was a really great time and a really great experience to be on the call with such a strong, small group of guys so early on.
And all those guys are still very prolific in the industry for the most part. So you go from House of Blues, and at some point you wind up at AEG.
Yeah, I got a call from Joe Litvag, who was looking for a buyer. We had a couple of great conversations. Maybe I wasn't terribly keen on moving to St. Louis, but I think on our third or fourth conversation was when Joe broke to me that it wasn't going to be in St. Louis, it was going to be in Chicago. That was all I needed to hear, because my only trepidation, frankly, was moving to St. Louis. And with the benefit of hindsight, I should have taken the job wherever it was. But certainly, in my opinion, going to Chicago was far more attractive than going to St. Louis. And they brought me to Chicago at the time when AEG was working with Nokia a lot. Nokia Theater in New York City had not even been built yet. LA Live was going to be built with the Nokia Theater and Club Nokia. They were going to look to make the Congress Theater Nokia Theater Chicago. They were going to put a bunch of money into it and really ramp that place up and have that be part of a network with similar kind of assets and a similar kind of
Chicago,
feel.
New York, LA, great start.
Exactly right. Long story longer, and well above my pay grade, the real estate deal with the Congress and some of the surrounding property didn't work out. So then I found myself in Chicago with no history and no venue to book, going up against Michael Yerke and the guys from Jam, and I would get my ass kicked on a daily basis.
As anyone would. Because
as anyone would. I mean,
wow.
It was an insurmountable task.
I mean, at that point, you're talking about both Arnie and Jerry still buying. You're talking about Don Sullivan. Yep. You're talking about Andrew. You're talking about Nick Miller. It's like,
and
wow.
And no one even thought about me when calling Chicago. They had no reason to. It was just an unfortunate situation. But the company had my back. I started doing shows in Detroit. Not that that's an easy market, but I was able to bring to the AEG fold an amazing venue called the Royal Oak Music Theater. I helped shepherd that deal through and started booking a lot of dates at it. When I left that office, as a matter of fact, I helped hire Jason Rogalewski, one of our fantastic buyers who's just crushing into that market right now. Doing shows in Detroit, like I said, Columbus, a ton of shows in Kansas City. Just doing shows to kind of fill in the gap and cover my salary. Was on the road a lot, and it definitely wasn't the ideal situation.
Were you the precursor to AEG's venues there that Mike D had kind of helped develop along?
Not really.
But there weren't any of those things yet, right?
The Midland Theater wasn't there. I was doing shows at the Uptown Theater and the Beaumont Club.
Okay, so you're kind of competing with Jeff Fortier.
Yeah, to a certain degree. Where Joe Litvag cultivated a lot of radio shows up there. I kind of pilfered some action off of those things, again, just to be a utility guy and be another guy booking shows and making some money. While I wasn't unhappy there, I certainly wanted to identify with the market more, have more focus on what it was I was going to be doing. There was one division in the company that I think everyone was envious of at the time, referring to AEG, of course, and that was our Las Vegas operation. John Meglin and John Nelson started the Coliseum at Caesar's Palace, the most successful theater in the world.
At the time or even now?
Even now.
Now, how do you judge that? What is that based on?
Amount of tickets sold and gross.
Those are two very solid things that you judge something
about.
Yeah,
those are pretty good barometers. And gross-wise, I don't remember what the other venues are, but in Billboard, there's actually an ad in the Coliseum. I'll send it over to you. And it talked about the most successful theaters under, I think it's 6,500 capacity in the world. And the Coliseum, I hope I'm not fucking this up when I say opened up in 2003, before my time here. So these other venues had a 3-year head start on the Coliseum. And if you added up the gross revenue for venues number 2, 3, 4, and 5, they don't equal what the Coliseum is.
These are Vegas venues.
No. These are in the U.S. Fox Theater in Atlanta, Fox in Detroit.
Wow.
I'll take a screenshot of that ad and send it to you. It's like...
Cool, we'll put it on our social media so everybody can adjacent with this.
One of the most impressive things I've seen statistic-wise in this business.
So Titanic may have sank the ship, but it built the Coliseum.
That's a great line.
You guys can pay me for that, whatever you want. Sure.
The business out here was Celine, it was Bette Midler, it was Cher. Certainly the venue was built for Celine, and Celine was and still is, the biggest act out here. And then Peter Morton sold the Hard Rock. I'm living in Chicago. The Vegas business is going strong. AEG gets the contract to book the Hard Rock.
Because it was Hewitt Silva before that.
Mm-hmm. Under Peter Morton's regime.
Right.
Peter sold it to a different hedge fund. There's been several ownership changes in the past decade that we've been involved there. AEG got the contract to book the venue. It was John Meglin that got it done. And in true Meglin fashion, it was like, okay, well, now I need someone to do it. And as the story, as I understand it, is Meglin asked Larry Fallon who we should have doing it. And he goes, I got just the guy for you. So I was living in Chicago, booking the joint, coming out here in the wintertime to go cover shows, like leaving the Chicago winter and coming to cover shows at the Hard Rock was a pretty awesome time. But after probably 6 months of doing that from Chicago, Meglin asked me to move out here. And I did. Couldn't be happier. Love it out here. Been out here 10 years. And it was my job to kind of cultivate the market outside of the Coliseum. To say that was a well-oiled machine is an understatement. So at the time, did everything at the joint, did some one-offs at the Coliseum on the very few weekends that there weren't resident artists.
Right, because at the time you guys had Selena and Elton's, and between them, that's...
Well, really, I mean, it was Selena, Elton, and then different residency shows popped in, and we'd fill in weekends. We would book Mexican Independence Day separately, maybe do some late night stuff on the appropriate weekend. By late night, I mean a comedian at 10:30 on Memorial Day Saturday. You know,
or Seinfeld or something, right? Yeah.
There were different things that went in, but not a ton. Would buy a handful of arena shows, bunch of shows at the pool at Mandalay Bay, and again started to cultivate an entertainment business out here aside from what we were doing at the Coliseum. But make no doubt about it, the Coliseum was definitely our bread and butter.
Okay, so the Coliseum is in full swing, and for anyone that hasn't heard the story about how the Coliseum came to be, I would urge you to go back and listen to the John Meglin podcast where he talks about cutting the deal with Anschutz up against the wall, explaining his vision and cutting it in person in real time, holding him up against the wall while he's explaining the thing. You got to go back and listen to it because it's a great interview. I won't recast it because he tells it better than anybody. You guys are big into the market between having the joint and now you've got Caesars with the Coliseum. And Caesars is probably the only property that's kept up throughout all the eras with staying hip.
Absolutely. They've done a great job reinventing themselves, and Coliseum played an enormous role in that, bringing in stadium-level headline talent to play in a beautifully designed, soft-seat, 4,300 capacity theater. I mean, it's just an awesome place to see a show, and like I was telling you at lunch, you see some of the entertainers in there, you can't help but to be massively impressed, and the intimacy that's what allows us to charge as much as we do for those tickets. It's the experiences that everyone in the business talks about now, to Meglin's credit, knowing you can charge so much money for a ticket and provide someone with that experience. People were afraid to do that, and John wasn't. And that's what caused the Coliseum to be such a high-grossing venue, like I said.
Okay, so Meglin cuts the deal, and then you're here putting in the plays. Like, he's the coach calling the plays from the sideline. You're the quarterback here on the field pulling it off.
And John Nelson is the executive here that kind of runs the day-to-day business. So it's pretty easy for me just to go ahead and try to get new venue deals and then book the venues that we have. John handles a lot of the day-to-day operation in this market and absolutely facilitates on deals. But for sure, his forte is running the office here and kind of letting everyone do what they do best.
So now that we've done the history, let's talk about the fact that Vegas is your market for AEG. You oversee this market. You got two things that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. One is you're still buying one-off shows, and the other is you're dealing with residencies, setting them up and then keeping them running. So that's two different pitches. So let's do the residency first, and then we'll talk about the market itself and the one-offs. So when you're going through developing a residency and cutting that deal, you're talking to an act that's used to their stadium or arena touring, because it's got to be an act of that level, a Jennifer Lopez or Gwen Stefani or Bette Midler, whoever it may be, but somebody that's touring with 12, 20 semis, right? You got to talk them into playing a theater and doing a more intimate show than they've done in years. That's got to be a very personal pitch each time.
Yeah, it is. And it gets easier and easier, frankly, as the business goes on, because the word spreads. And I'll tell you, I've never worked with an artist, whether it's something as big as the Coliseum, whether it's something at the Joint or something at the Wynn, where the artist doesn't like the concept. A couple of things go into booking. Before you get to the pitch, you want to identify the artist that you want to go after, right? Whether it's Live Nation doing Gwen Stefani or whether it's AEG doing Elton John or Celine Dion, even if we're doing Journey at the Hard Rock, Rascal Flatts at the Hard Rock, regardless of the venue or the property, the artists have to have a catalog. And they have to have years of history putting on great shows and having a reputation for that. People, you're in Vegas for 3 nights. You want to go see something you know is going to knock your socks off. You know Gwen Stefani is going to put on a show. Why? Because you've seen her before. You know she's a pro. You know she knows what she's doing. And you know you're going to go in there tonight and probably know 85% of the songs, if not more. That goes back to the catalog. When artists have been around so long to accrue a catalog and accrue a reputation for being a great live artist, frankly, it's a welcome change to them to ditch the buses, ditch the private jets, ditch the 12 trucks, come in and do a cut-down thing, take the elevator to work, wake up in the same beautiful bed every day instead of traversing the country back and forth. We talk about a home field advantage for sports all the time. We don't talk about it for the music business. A residency is the closest thing you're ever going to have to a home field advantage.
Hold on one sec. You just said take the elevator to work. In the case of the Coliseum, Celine can literally do that, right? The apartment's literally attached to the theater for her.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that clean.
But she doesn't have to deal with the public if she doesn't want to.
Definitely not. No one has to. Whether it's here at the Wynn, whether it's at the Hard Rock. We just toured the backstage area for the Encore Theater. You see how well thought out these theaters are and how well constructed they are. But yeah, that's exactly what I meant. They take the elevator to work. They take the elevator down. They get in their car, typically, into a car that we provide, and we drop them off right backstage. They leave their room and they're in the venue in no more than 4 minutes. It's a very easy and efficient way to do your business. Like I said, no trucks, no buses, in-house sound and lights. Another thing, I mean, we talk about the big, robust shows, the big, huge production shows in Vegas. Here at the Encore, it's almost a different kind of mentality that we pitch. And it's to make the shows less about the production and maybe more about the artist. You're in such an intimate place. You don't need all the production, and you might put a different spin on it by having it be more storytelling-centric, more singer-songwriter-centric. You know, we've done a lot of shows in here. I find the more simple shows are the ones that I happen to like a little bit more and are a bit more well-received than some of the others.
Kind of the idea of Garth just cut down when he played here. Just him and a guitar, not the big band thing that he was touring with. Just
we were not involved in that deal, but that's the exact pitch.
And an
that
intimate
Steve
evening
gave
of
to
music.
Garth and they wanted to do. And I love that concept. I mean, I want to see more of that. And frankly, we're actually in real conversations right now with an artist about doing something just like that. And if it pans out, it'll be awesome.
Live Nation and AEG are both doing these residencies all over town, but you guys aren't really competing for the residencies a lot, right? It's like you guys are pitching to an artist. It's probably an idea. Nobody else has talked to them yet or whatever. It's not usually one against the other in that case. It's just...
I mean, I wouldn't say that's the case. There are definitely times we're going for the same artist, and I win a fair amount of them. Live Nation gets a fair amount of them. Live Nation, everyone listening to this podcast knows, has management relationships with artists and
tour deals.
And a very robust tour deal. And
as do you guys.
A very wise addendum to a tour deal is a residency option. And I think we've done a great job. I think Live Nation's done a great job of getting artists to town that maybe you wouldn't think you would see them doing a residency. I mean, MGM landed a Lady Gaga deal. That's bringing in such a big name, younger artist. It's going to open the door for many more. You know, one can make an argument Britney Spears helped do that, or Jennifer Lopez helped do that.
Well, yeah, they seem to be skewing younger and younger. Yeah. Now you're seeing Blink-182 do one. You're seeing Gwen Stefani do one. So you're talking about this has now made it to the mid-90 acts.
Yeah, and I think we'll see more of that. Blink-182 is another example of a band that has a great catalog. You're going to go see the show at Blink at the Palms, and if you're a mid-level Blink-182 fan, you're going to know 80% of the songs that are there, if not more of them.
So who would have thought the day that punk rock would be a residency in Las Vegas?
Yeah, right.
It's a thing now. I mean, obviously you're talking about Jennifer Lopez, which seems to lend itself as a movie star and a pop act. It seems like Will Smith would be, a candidate for something like that. Those mainstream movie stars that have huge catalogs that 40 years of music lovers are into. Obviously anything attached to something big pop like The Who or the Rolling Stones would easily grab attention.
Right.
But now we're moving into the younger generations, not just the divas and the crooners. So it seems like that opens itself up to a mass number of artists that can be pulling from all over the place. It seems like Tool could do one, and that would be huge.
Tool could do one and start tomorrow, and it would blow out. I get asked almost in every single interview, which artist do you want to do? I'm a huge Dave Matthews fan. Dave could do one in a heartbeat. Tool could easily do one. Zach Brown could do one. There's a huge list of these rock artists or pop artists, younger artists that could do a residency. I don't know that the younger artists are really ready to do residencies yet. Every single time that one does do one, it gets easier.
So let's talk about the investment. In the case of Celine or Elton, those are big production shows.
Right.
And I know Britney rolled out an amazing production show. When you're doing a residency, a lot of these, like The Who was just basically a cut down version of their arena show, but wasn't a huge production show. Where in the scope of things we're shooting the wad on this, we're building a full show around Elton John versus we're just doing 6 shows with The Who. And I'm guessing in the case of The Who was The Who were probably only willing to do 6 shows at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of the Who, it was always let's try 6 shows out and see how we like it. And we liked it, and they liked it. Maybe it will come around back again. I don't know. But certainly no one, neither us or The Who, was looking to invest millions of dollars in set creation for a 6-show deal.
Right, but if they wanted to do Tommy here, would they'd actually perform it for a long-term residency? I imagine you guys would write a check for that very quickly on a big production show.
Absolutely, like we've done for Elton and Celine and countless others, but that has to be part of a much bigger deal.
Right, because you have to recoup it.
Have to recoup it.
So at what point of the process is we see this as a 3 to 10 year possible residency versus let's try 6 shows and then go from there?
You know, like any other deal, like any deal you cut or I cut, it's a conversation. We have a residency with Reba Brooks and Dunn over at the Coliseum. We started out 2 years. We extended it for another run and are in conversations about extending it even further. It's been a great show. That show's set works so well for them. And here's another Meglin quote. You have all your shit from all the other tours and warehouses. Bring that out and resurrect that. You already have it. You're already paid for it.
The best of.
So there's so many ways to skin the cat. And frankly, people want, whether you call it best of or not, that's what people want in Vegas. They don't want to hear 8 new songs, in a set. They want
the
90 minutes. They want to hear the hits, and they want to go do a million other things that night, So it's like anything else. If we've made commitments to artists, long-term, multi-year, multi-million-dollar commitments, haven't afforded them a production budget. We've done deals with artists where we've given them multi-million-dollar production budgets. At the end of the day, it also goes into the expense pot, right? If we're fronting someone $5 million to build a show over X amount of shows, well, we're going to pay them X less.
Right. It's all factored in.
Exactly right. It's all factored in.
That's one thing you just mentioned with Brooks and Dunn and Reba. Brooks and Dunn don't tour anymore. They're done. Same thing in the case of George Strait. So Louis got George Strait to do a residency at the arena here, but he's not touring. He's done touring. He did his farewell. Cher done touring, but will still play Vegas. They've done their farewells, but yet you guys have figured out a setup that made it comfortable that whatever it is they don't like about being on the road, they're not touring anymore, but yet you guys were able to get him to come here and still perform. Same thing with Garth Brooks. Wynn got him to come back when he decided he wasn't going to work any longer. They liked it so much, he decided to fucking tour again.
Well, there's two things. One, they're not touring, and they're not making a ton of money off their album catalog sales, right? So here's an opportunity for an artist that doesn't have to tour, doesn't have to put up with all the rigors of touring, the expense of touring, but they can still come perform their craft, be handsomely compensated, and still cultivate that relationship with their fan base. And it provides another opportunity. In the case of Brooks and Dunn, the story goes, there's old stories that they really didn't get along on the road. They had their disagreements on the road, but they never hated each other or battled each other at odds like maybe was depicted in some journalism. But anyway, Kix and Ronnie and Reba and their significant others were at the Palm in Nashville getting ready to go see Elton John at Bridgestone Arena, who ironically just wrapped up a multi-year residency at the Coliseum. And they got into talking, and their words, they were drinking some wine at dinner, and they missed getting back out there. They missed performing, but just didn't have a desire to be on the road every single night. I think it was Ronnie who said, well, man, if I could find a little honeypot, I'd love to play again. I just don't want to be on the road. About a day later, they waited a full day, and Rob Beckham gave me a call. And honestly, it didn't really take long. We got that deal done quickly. We're going to have nearly 100 shows by the time all is said and done with those guys. And they do it so right. I can't tell you, we talked about this earlier. They come out here, they stay their entire run. Some artists, especially the ones that live in LA, they might go back for a few days. They're all based in Nashville. They come out here. Ronnie Dunn is a very accomplished photographer. Goes to the state parks, the national parks that are drivable from Las Vegas.
So he's got a hobby.
He has a hobby. Kix Brooks, great golfer. He and I golf every time he's out here, a couple rounds a time. His friends come out, they fly out, and they go golf. They go get a steak dinner at night on his off days. Like, they love being out here. Reba works like crazy and is always, doing something work-oriented, whether it's going to the studio or a quick trip out to L.A. for meetings or for whatever it may be. But they come out here and avoid all the rigors of touring and all the demands on their time and their body, and just they love it here. It's become Ronnie Dunn's honeypot, and he said that in interviews. He loves the sound, he loves taking the elevator to work, and he loves on his off days being able to explore this beautiful part of the country.
Right. Well, if Ronnie Dunn doesn't have a cowboy hat on and boots, he can probably walk through the casino not being bothered.
He's literally, I think, the only guy that does that. When he gets down towards the Coliseum through the casino, there's a lot of people walking around with cowboy hats and jeans on, and he just kind of puts his head down and goes. And by the way, if people do recognize him, and it definitely happens, there isn't a more gracious person to their fans on the planet.
So let's talk about some of the ones that almost happened or that you guys went for that would have been cool. I'm sure Simon and Garfunkel had to have been pitched, right?
Yeah, that's definitely one that we spoke about. for sure.
You figure after they did the reunion tour, there was a shot.
Yeah, thought there might have been.
Because that was just like when it was happening, it had to be like one of those things where they don't have to be out together. They just have to show up on the stage and then they can go back into their separate worlds.
I was telling you before, it's great when an agent gets the resident model. Some don't. As you well know, some agents are just focused on that number next to the word guarantee, and they don't want to hear anything else about it.
Are you saying some agents are money driven?
I'm saying some agents are able to look at things a little bit differently, and maybe, we used this word before, put a different spin on it to their clients. And Dennis Arfa is one of the guys that gets that really, really well. Dennis has Rod Stewart in residency over at the Coliseum. Pete Papalardo and I did several residency runs with Motley Crue, another artist that's not touring any longer. Adam Kornfeld and I did a Def Leppard run together.
Yeah, talk about big production shows. Those metal hair bands that you're talking about from the 80s and 90s, like those guys are giving up a ton of production in those rooms, and that's half their show.
Billy Joel, I think, is one that I would love to see get going. And what keeps me optimistic is that Dennis really gets the model, which makes things a little bit more difficult.
Well, he has a residency currently.
Madison Square Garden, and it's great. I think, like a lot of singers, this arid air in Las Vegas sometimes fucks with one's vocal cords.
Somehow Elton makes it work.
Elton makes it happen.
We broke this into two pieces.
Yes.
We could talk about the residencies forever because it fascinates me, and we've never really talked about it on the podcast, so I think that's a fascinating piece. You also compete on a day-to-day basis with not only the casinos and Live Nation and C3 in the case of the Cosmopolitan, you've got a very competitive one-off business in this market. Now, before we just talk about going to town and buying shows in a competitive market, which this is, we have to factor in the fact that not only are you dealing with casino money, which a lot of people are around the country too, because there are casinos everywhere, but you have the biggest casinos in the world literally competing with you that have loss leader money to fuck with you as much as they want to. You have places with huge capacities and huge abilities. On top of that, you've got shows that no one else has competing with them. You've got magic and you've got giveaways and you've got circus theme parks like right down the street. All of this against you, plus all of the other residencies, the sporting events, what have you. So before you put a show on sale on any night of the week, you have more competing with you in this market than any other market in the world.
There are certainly difficult markets to be a promoter in. Being in Denver, I think, would be a really tough market to do shows in. New York, LA. But no doubt in my mind, this is the most competitive market. You touched on a lot of those things. The casino loss leader business, that's not so prevalent anymore. These resorts, especially this one that you're sitting in, multi-billion-dollar developments. Entertainment departments are treated like any other division. They need to hit budget. Does it happen sometimes? Of course it does. You know, the Hard Rock is a property that will take on some losses. They're off the strip. They want the foot traffic. They want the great branding.
Especially if it's a cooler show,
Especially if it's a cooler show. You know, we just wrapped up this year. We've done 5 Nine Inch Nails dates at the Joint. Not too many 4,500 seaters Nine Inch Nails is going into. And for all of those shows, we were the only shows announced in the U.S. They blew out. That doesn't come with an inexpensive price tag. Now, if you ask the Hard Rock if that was worth cutting the deal, in 2 seconds they would say yes. And it absolutely is.
Because those are all destination shows for their fans.
They're destination shows that's a very on-brand band for them, meaning their fans are going to stick around the Hard Rock. Nine Inch Nails wasn't a residency, it was repeat business. We do different things for that to make the artist happy. Custom gaming felts. We had their signage everywhere as much as Trent wanted to allow us to put up there. They had billboards all along the strip, even though we'd been sold out for months before they got here. That's all well and good. That's what I kind of call common sense marketing. Other people maybe don't do all those things that I like to do. The details that we spend time on, Trent curated a playlist that was to be, he lined up people to buy tickets in advance this time on the arena run. You had to go to the box office and buy
physically,
your tickets.
you lined up like you did like it was the 90s.
Yeah, and he curated a playlist for the venues to play while people were waiting online. Pretty cool, We took that playlist, and every 7th song at the Hard Rock 24 hours a day was a song off that playlist.
Oh, nice.
So, he loved that. You know what I mean? Not only, it wasn't an ego thing about hearing the songs, but it was the attention to detail and the idea to do it and the thought that went behind it. And
kind of like the city of Chicago playing the Dead music everywhere for Fare Thee Well.
I mean, you're kind of able to do those kind of things with
create the vibe.
Create the vibe. I consider the Hard Rock to be a campus of the artist that's playing there. It's a relatively big venue, 4,500 for the amount of hotel rooms. I think 1,200. This place has 7,000 rooms, and we booked a 1,500 seater downstairs.
We're talking about Wynn, by the way. I don't know if we mentioned where we were at.
As great a venue as that is, 1,500 people on this property is not insanely impactful. 4,500 people at the Hard Rock is insanely impactful. If you can provide that campus feeling and make it where Nine Inch Nails fans want to stay. That's what we're in this business for, right?
You're talking about massive per heads, and you're not talking about $20 in beer. You're talking about $1,000 for them in their meals and their room and all of their swag needs while they're there. You're getting all of it.
And that goes back,
and they're gambling.
That
Jesus,
goes back to something
when you do this.
That goes back to what we were saying before, which you recognized. Not only is it difficult to land shows in this market, but once you land them and you go on sale, the amount of competition that any promoter has for someone's entertainment dollar, I mean, it's ridiculous out here. Whether it's legal or illegal, there are a zillion options of things to do out here. You want to do things you're not doing in your hometown. Not any city in the world has the amount of Cirque du Soleil shows here. They're all great. They're great. And if you're living in Chicago or you're, wherever you're living in the U.S., your city doesn't have an $80 million nightclub like Hakkasan is. It doesn't have a $100 million nightclub like Omni does. It doesn't have it doesn't have Le Rev. It doesn't have all these things that you can go do. So are you going to go see Social Distortion at the Brooklyn Bowl when you're here? Well, you can go do that in your town. You don't need to spend a night going to see Social D in Las Vegas.
Probably the only city in the world, though, where you're competing between a Social D ticket and David Copperfield, and it's a jump ball.
Do I go to Social D, or do I go to Copperfield, or do I gamble, or do I go to a strip club? I was going to spend money on a ticket and drinks. I'm going to put it on my alma mater and see how they do. They're playing tomorrow, and they're massive underdogs.
And there's always something new because the city is constantly building and opening.
Always something new, always something different. Drinks, food. If you live in a very big city like Dallas, Guy Savoy doesn't have a restaurant there. Guy Savoy has a restaurant here. If you're a foodie and you want to try Guy Savoy, it's a $600 meal. Where do you spend your money? How do you allocate
and how much
money?
of that is there?
Yeah, right. Or if you're making decisions, what gets cut? Do I go see this concert or do I go see David Copperfield? Do I go to Guy Savoy? Do I go to the strip club? Whatever it might be. Again, there's a million options out here.
Because it's Vegas and people travel in and make decisions late, you guys have these massively expensive shows that I imagine, a good majority of them, you guys sell a ton of the tickets in the last 72 hours. Are you trained to recognize that that's the trend? And can you tell when a show is not trending correctly towards the end? Or is it always gets there in the end because this is Vegas and that's how it works?
D, all the above. We freak the fuck out sometimes.
Because everything sells like a reggae concert here, right? Like everything.
That's good to look at. They say it's something like 82% of the people, when they get to Vegas, don't know what they're going to do in Vegas. That's why when you flew in here, all the advertising you see at the airport, taxi trunks, taxi hops, you're inundated with messaging the moment you get to town because there's so many options and so many things to do.
See, I do it the other way. I try not to tell people I'm coming to Vegas, so I don't have managers and agents telling me you got to see my act.
But, that provides a certain level of excitement. And I have conversations with agents all the time.
Yeah, they got to be freaking out, too, because you got to be the lowest count of the two or constantly on the one-offs.
I constantly hear that line.
Yeah, but it's probably true when they tell you, with the highest guarantee, too, I'm sure.
With the highest guarantee. If we're doing a show in an arena, the casino might be holding, pick a number, 2,500 tickets. We have our deals with the casino. We know when they're committed versus held, okay? If I'm telling the agent they're committed, they're committed. They don't process them right away. They're busy. They have a lot of stuff going on. There's a fight with $85 million in the purse. There's huge things going on at all times. They're not so focused on, these 2,000 pick an artist tickets that they're being held. And they're committed to, by the way.
So regardless, sell them or not, they're paying for them.
But then I get a phone call from the agent. Oh, we want to make sure those aren't going to go unused. I'm like, they're not. People want to see them. And I've had this conversation no less than 500 times, I think. And every single time, I've been right. I've never once had an agent come out and say, man, you told me the first 3 rows would be filled up. They're empty. We're fucked. Blah, 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 blah. It doesn't happen that way anymore. The casinos aren't giving away high-priced tickets willy-nilly to someone that's not going to go or someone that's not a real bona fide, gambler.
I think we've all just built that fear into them with the PBS tours, where those high pledges come in and people are just like, yeah, we give money to PBS.
And I do understand their concern, like anyone, when you have the same conversation a couple hundred times, and then I know you know your market, but
you guys are in the game all the way through. You're competing with Live Nation. You guys have a serious stake in this market, like no other financially, between building buildings, building residencies, doing one-offs, booking the Brooklyn Bowl, booking the Joint, booking the Win here, booking Caesars. You guys are all over the place with your residencies. The volume you guys are doing is insane. Top of your game right now, it seems. What's next that you want to do that you haven't pulled off yet, Bobby?
I would love to. A lot of the younger acts that have come here have been of the pop persuasion. I want to get some younger rock acts in here. I think it would be so well received. I have my dream list. You probably imagine who they are, Dave, Chili Peppers.
Well, if Blink's doing it, you figured Chili Peppers could be doing it. If they're doing festivals, it doesn't seem that far off.
And that's what I was saying, like the more artists that come in and do that, the better off I am. There's no doubt about it. That word will spread, and 99.9% of the time, it's a good word. So, even Blink's thing, that's a weekend piece of business. It's not a real consistent type show. It's their version of a residency. Much like I didn't want to refer to Nine Inch Nails as a residency. I, with all due respect, I know that's a real traditional residency. Not a knock on anyone, but you're doing 6 or 9 shows in a 2 or 3 week period, and you're doing multiple runs of those. That feels like a residency to me. Nine Inch Nails and the guys at Live Nation and the Palms being good at what they do and being very opportunistic with a property relaunch over at the Palms. It's a great piece of business for them. I would love to see, though, a more real...
Like a Green Day or something, doing like 30 days or something.
Yeah, exactly right.
The way Motley Crue did it.
Exactly the way Motley Crue did it. And Motley Crue, I think, was one of the coolest things I've been a part of. And I'm not the world's biggest Motley Crue fan, but those guys got it from... Well, fuck me. Those guys got it from day one. They all flew out to see the joint, to walk the property. Nikki Sixx is insanely involved and a really smart guy.
Yeah, those guys are showmen and they get it.
And they get it. And not only was their show fantastic, but the show, more than any residency I've seen, the show started and continued before and after the show. What do I mean? We had people on the casino floor breathing fire. We had stilt walkers. We had bearded... they
created atmosphere.
We had the Carnival of Sin City. Those guys really embraced it and really knocked the cover off the ball from a creativity standpoint, and also just getting it. Like knowing they weren't spending money on hotel rooms and all this other shit. They spent money on other things to continue to fortify their brand, and that's what's kept them around so long.
Advice for the young kids coming up in the business that want to find themselves going from being alone in an apartment booking shows to running Vegas for a major promoter?
Yeah, we just had this conversation not that long ago with someone, and it's just work. Just go to work, grind. I mean, this is a business where, at least if you kind of came up how I did through bigger companies and being an employee and climbing the ranks that way, I made no money for a long time. Just keep working. I mean, just keep being a promoter. Keep creating, keep doing things, keep trying things within your means, but just keep working. I remember living in LA, working for Kev Morrow, making $22,500 a year, and like being envious as fuck of my cousin that was making $55,000 a year. And I was like, oh man, like if I could ever make $55,000 a year, life would be so much better. I loved what I did then. I love what I do now. There were times when not making money seemed like a real drag, and maybe I would second guess my career decision, but never for real. It was just when I was in a funk, and when I had a shitty day at work, and I was late on my car payment. Those thoughts crept in, but I never applied for a job at a bank or went to go to a car dealership to sell cars. I've only been in this business, and this is really the only business for me.
Promoter 101 with the great Bobby Reynolds.
Great being here. Thank you.
Bobby's such a great guy. Love that we finally got him on the podcast.
This is John Schultz. I'm Windish.
Charlie from Crescent Ballroom.
Craig Newman.
Dave Brooks. Dave Ratner.
John Holiday.
Doug Bicknell.
LX.
Imong Shaw.
Celia Lefko.
Gerald B. Henley.
Harlan Fry here.
Jack Ross.
Jason Miller.
Jeffrey Fox. Joe Escalante.
Blair LeBlanc.
Martin Atkins.
Neil Dixon.
Nick Farkas.
Paula Palazzo.
And I'm on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Tweets of the week.
It just can't be avoided. It's that time. It's time for Tweets of the Week. First up, ticket service charge fees are the mystery meat of rock and roll.
No idea what makes them up, but clearly they're not going away, and we must have them as part of our healthy rock and roll diet, Jamie.
All right, well, I don't eat meat, so I don't know what that says. But hey, next, when you've been covering mostly seated shows for so long, you forget how fun a mosh pit can be.
Shout out to Ghost and Social Distortion for reminding me of my youth recently. The pit can be a good time. Jamie, you've done some Slayer shows recently. You visit the pit?
I've visited, but I've observed from afar.
Well, they can be a sweaty, unhappy place, but they are fun to watch, and they make you feel very youthful.
8 vertebrae fused and 2 rods in my back. I don't think that moshing is in my future.
But hey, that's a story for another podcast.
All right, next up. When an agent asks you for 180% of the show's sellout gross for a baby band, that will not come close to selling out.
Oh, it's the magic of our industry. It's what it's all based on. I know they're not going to gross it, but you know what? Just be there for us, guys.
Just give it to us anyway. Come on.
It's there. Come on. You can afford it. Come on.
All right, that does it for Promoter 101 tweets. You can follow Dan at the Jew on Twitter.
Hey there, this is Seth Hurwitz. I am one of the last independent promoters and proud of it, and you are listening to Promoter 101.
Next, a war story with Kill the 8 merch company's Aaron Rosen.
Promoter 101, we've got a war story. Joining us is Aaron Rosen. Tell us a tale, my friend.
Okay, so I don't know if it's a war story or more of a very valuable lesson. And this happened, I would say, 2.5 years into working with Kill the 8. We were fortunate enough to get introduced to a very popular vintage hip hop artist that was going out on tour nationally across the country. Things worked out. We got to work with them. It was a huge thrill. Everything worked out super awesome.
Nothing about this sounds like a war story so far.
Here we go. So the valuable lesson that was learned that I will take with me for many, many future moons, we, I guess, to entice working with them, extended really favorable terms on what we supplied. The artist came in, met us on arrival to pick up their initial order. Everything was paid properly. Merch sales went beyond what was projected and expected. We had to go into an immediate re-up because they were going westbound across the country and we had to keep up with it. So we went ahead and went into a huge...
So you fronted for them financially?
We did. We extended some terms. I believe at that time it was like net 15, which really isn't a lot. At the end of the day, on that second supply, it was shipped. It wasn't picked up in person, and we kind of got the go around. You know, it was like, well, come meet us at our hotel when we're in Toronto and we'll settle up, which then turned into come drive out to London, Ontario, which is about an hour and a half west of where we're sitting. And I'll settle up with you after the show. Long story short, we go up. I'm watching the show. We're backstage after. Everyone's hanging out, having a really good time. It comes time to confront the manager, which I do with my tail between my legs and, basically get to business affairs. And we basically got the go F yourself. We're doing okay. And we'll pay you when it's time and when we're ready.
Did they ever pay you?
No. Valuable lesson learned.
So never trust a vintage hip hop artist with your product in advance.
Exactly. As exciting as it is, and as happy as you are, business is business and you got to keep safe.
War Stories with Aaron Rosen. Thanks so much.
Pleasure.
Watch for a full interview with Aaron coming up shortly on Promoter 101, but not this week, so don't watch that closely.
Hello, this is Sarah Mertz.
Rick Barrow.
Nick Light.
Mark Geiger.
This is Lee Anderson.
Kevin Lyman.
John Giddings. Jim Runge. Jeff White. Brian Zisk. Chuck Randall. Brian O'Connell.
Andrea Johnson.
Adam Parsons.
Darielle Hyatt.
Ben Mensch.
Jamie Miller.
Billy Wayne Davis.
Brandon Frankel.
Mitch LaFon.
Jake Gould.
Gary Smith. Jeff Cohen.
You are on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Next, we are joined by the lovely and talented Noel Largess from APA.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
You rock the world of middle of the road at APA. You guys do all sorts of adult contemporary, PACs, and we're really doing a serious amount of business right now.
Holding it down on the West Coast, for sure. Casinos, performing arts centers, theaters. I'm handling it all.
Just the sexiest part of our business.
Very, very sexy. Everyone's always dying to go to my shows, if it's your parents.
You started as a performer, and you still play, right?
Correct. I played cello from age 9 until now. So that was my influence and what got me started. And I like that my roots are really as a performer and in music. And it really helped me to transfer from a classical background into theaters. Most people my age are really interested in the cool hip clubs. And I grew up in theaters. I played at Vets in Providence and at PPAC and all that since about 5th grade. So theater was what I know, and that sort of became an easy transition for me as an adult.
Rhode Island is where you cut your teeth?
Yep. I grew up in Rhode Island and I went to Syracuse University. Go Orange, which is an amazing, amazing alumni network. And that has been really helpful to me just getting my foot in the door initially at the agency group and with networking out here in LA. And yeah, it's been really great.
Okay, so you started the agency group and were you on Andrea Johnson's desk at first?
I started as the receptionist, which shout out to Kate Hanley Vistano over at UTA for giving me my first job. And she thought I could handle answering the phone and taking lunch orders and go from there. So it was really great. I mean, that was in 2008, which was really tough. I graduated from 2007 and I had about a year break. I had some family stuff to take care of. And going in 2008 when the economy was bottoming out and lots of people weren't taking risk and moving around and getting new jobs was tricky. So I was really happy and excited to sort of slide right in there right before the next graduating class came out. And there were a lot of opportunities within the company there because of the agents who were there at that time and in that window, I guess. So
thinking about you as the receptionist at the agency group New York back then is like being a receptionist at a big fraternity house that's really nice.
Pretty much. I mean,
it was very male dominated office.
It was super male dominated. I mean, Natalia was there, Andrea was there, and that was about it in terms of agent level or management level. But it was great. And that was my first summer living in New York City after I had graduated college. And I really felt like I made it. I finally got my foot in the door somewhere. I'm at a big agency. People know what I'm doing. And I was out at shows all the time. They always invited me and I was treated as an equal member on their team. And I remember the first show I went to when I was with the agency group. It was The Raconteurs. It was Dave Kaplan's act at Terminal 5.
Jack White.
I didn't even really know the intense history that Dave had with Jack at the time and sort of how that had helped grow the agency in New York in particular. And we stood, everyone just kept on slapping all these silk passes on my pants and on my jacket and just saying, go up a level, go up a level. And I just sort of followed with everybody. And I thought like, man, this is the coolest thing. That was the first time I had really been to a show with access. And we stood on that third level and someone turned to me and just said, hey, say hi over here. And it was Jim Glancy. And to be working there for a couple of weeks and to have them take the time to make me feel like I was important enough on the team to introduce me to Jim at my very first show ever was, to think about that now is just really crazy. So
pass upon pass upon pass gets you to Jim Glancy. The goal was to meet Glancy because in New York, he's the bigger rock star.
Right. And I doubt that he remembers how influential that was for me, but I had read about him and I knew who he was. And I don't know, it just that I really think about that first summer when I lived in New York and who was in that office at the time. It was Peter Schwartz, it was Dave Kaplan, it was Ken and Steve Martin, obviously, Josh Dick and Seth Rappaport. And it's just to have like one day in that frat house, like you were saying now, would be super cool because that was just like my little family when I started. So
it was always a fun office to run around and just like,
for sure.
Is this one of the days where Tim Boer's actually in New York? Okay, cool. He's not. Let's go raid the bar. Tim Boer has one of the best bars.
Yeah,
in
the
his
bar
office.
Definitely upgraded when we moved offices. But a little sidebar about Tim. When you first move to New York or when you first start at an agency in general, you're not really making that much money, right? You're starting at the very bottom.
The league minimum, we like to say.
The league minimum. And it was rough, but I figured it out for the most part. But I did have one time that it was the 30th going into the first of the month. And I was that couple $100 short or whatever. And Tim Boer gave me the money to pay my rent for the month. And
That's
I remember
awesome.
he came around the corner and he knew I was stressing, or I don't know how he found out that was just, it was a really tight month for me. Or maybe I had a little too much fun on the weekend or whatever. But he gave me the couple $100 I needed and a couple $100 extra so that I wasn't so crushed. And I remember I just sat there and cried. And I was so grateful. And
you pay him back?
I think I still owe you a couple $100, Tim Boer, and some drinks and maybe a restock at the bar. But
I bet he'd tell you to pay that forward to some other assistant that needs
exactly. So didn't even know what I was getting myself into with that group of people and how thankful I was that they stepped up and did stuff like that for me. So
mensch move. You gotta love that. The biggest, scariest tattooed motherfucker in the place.
Yeah, and I'm a white girl from Rhode Island, so that was something that I never really experienced up close. And he's a big teddy bear. So
Rhode Island. I don't know. I'm stuck on that.
I know. I'm probably the only person most of you know from Rhode Island, which is pretty cool.
Well,
so holding it down.
It's the home of the Dunkin' Donut Arena.
I was called something else there when changed Dunkin' Donuts Center when I was in high school or in college, but
I'm always curious if they sell donuts in the arena on the concourse.
I'm sure they do. I haven't been there in years and years.
It's not really an evening type of thing, but it is the Dunkin' Donuts Center. If you're going to see a basketball game and you can dribble your donut while you're dribbling the ball side.
And everyone goes crazy for their coffee out in here in Santa Monica, even though there's way, way better coffee than Dunkin' Donuts. But
you're at the agency group. You get promoted.
Yeah. At the time, Andrea Johnson and Mike Morey were sharing an assistant. It was Meredith Peters, now Meredith Croy. She said that she felt like it was a divorce where her parents were saying, pick one of us. So she went with Mike and the opportunity was with Andrea, which I was thrilled about because I really had felt that she and I were on the same wavelength and we had a similar background in terms of classical upbringing. And I sort of went seamlessly along with her and we had a great partnership. And to be with her when Straight No Chaser was playing the Largo. And when I left, or right before, the summer before I moved to play the Oakdale Theater, was incredible growth. So it was a wild ride, and I had never really seen that before, and she probably hadn't either. So we came in it together, and yeah.
Were you still an assistant when you moved to LA?
I was.
Okay, and you had the opportunity to move to LA, and you took that.
Yeah. So I was sort of getting a little restless, and as much as I loved my partnership with Andrea and the artist she was working on, and I was just looking for a change, and I was looking to make maybe a lateral move with hopes for growth a little sooner. And I had a great opportunity at APA through Corey Christopher, and she helped me make that move. And I really thought that I was just
Did you know her from your tag days?
I know her from my tag days. I just said, I'm getting a little restless. What do you think I should do? Just sort of as a friend. And can I just walk down the street and maybe start at APA? Because they were only about 4 blocks from each other in New York at the time. And she said, hold on, I'll call you back in 20 minutes. And when she called me back, she said, what do you think about LA instead of the 4 block move? And I was like, what do I have to lose?
Okay, so you moved to LA. You've got this new world. You start an assistant, but you move in, you get promoted, you get territory.
Well, I first landed on the desk of the one and only Craig Newman.
Oh, going from Andrea to Craig, that's got to be the most diverse booking style of personalities ever.
It was definitely different, but I mean, I was looking for a change at the time, and that's why I was looking to make the move. So
who's a better agent, Andrea or Craig?
Ooh, harsh words. I mean, their styles are totally different, and I think that they're really in different worlds, to be honest.
Which style's better? That's all right. I wouldn't answer it either.
Yeah. Yeah, but I went over to Craig because Craig had casino background, and that was when APA was really trying to develop a core adult contemporary performing arts department. So I was with Craig to sort of show him what I knew in addition to learning the APA way of doing things. So, and he was, in the way that I use the word partnership with Andrea, he really allowed me to be a partner with him, even though I was rolling calls and doing paperwork. But yeah, I remember that the Fab Four wanted to do a PBS special, and they had their first meeting with us to discuss that and sort of how that would integrate with touring after I had been working for Craig for maybe 2 weeks. And we sat in the meeting, and they said, this is who we're thinking of getting as the producer. And I said, oh, I know him. I've worked on XYZ with him at Agency Group, and he's great, and I highly recommend him, and I have a close relationship with him. And are you going to do a March pledge? Or are you going to do a Christmas pledge? And I remember we left the meeting, and Craig sort of gave me a little pat on the back and was just like, I'm so glad I hired you.
It's like, girl.
Yeah. So it was, and it felt good to feel like I was contributing something that was maybe a skill set that he wasn't super well versed in, and that I could bring something to the table in that way. So
PBS is a unique business opportunity, and most people can't wrap their head around it. And it's one of those things, though, once you get it, it's actually not that difficult. The concept of it really isn't that hard. It's just wrapping your head around giving away the comps and the best seats in the house and whatever, and then running the infomercial. But once you get your head wrapped around it, it's a pretty cool system.
It's its own animal, that's for sure. And you sort of have to know a few of the players and know how to speak the language, but you're right. Once you're in, it's easy to integrate that into other projects too.
All right, let's jump ahead. You do your time as assistant, you get promoted, you get your territory, natural transition of that. And you've been doing that for quite a while, and you do a lot of the arts booking. So in the midst of APA existing, half of your agency group family over the time has defected over to your world. Like, a huge stream of the people you used to work with are now back in your office. So you had probably amazing relationships as that happened. You knew all of those guys coming in.
Well, I'd like to first say that migrating from agency group to APA, I made it trendy.
I bet Corey Christopher would say she made it trendy.
Well, maybe Corey, Stan corrected, Corey made it trendy, but
Keith Nesmith might have some claim to that too, huh?
In terms of the bigger migration, I came over before Steve Martin, and later everyone always said, oh, you came with Steve. Oh, you came with Steve, or did you follow Steve? And I said, no, Steve followed me, which I think he'll get a chuckle out of. So it was Steve, and then
it was Andy first, right?
In LA, it was Andy first. So I knew Andy and Bruce pretty well, but I was never in the same office with him since I was in New York and they were in LA. But you're right, is that I did feel like it was easier for them to trust me with some of this stuff in the beginning. And although they knew Craig and Christiane and other people, and Humiston and other people who had been there for a long, long time, I think they trusted me as one of them. So
we should go back for a second, because I think actually Jamie Kelso gets the credit for being the first one to do the defection.
Yeah, I'm talking about the one in the last 5 years, really, more specifically. But yeah, when I first went in, it was.
When you think about that hallway, it's like.
Yeah, Jamie, John Panel, Keith. They were there all before me, so.
They merged an agency without actually merging an agency.
Yeah, an unofficial merge, I would say.
But people that you had a working relationship with from the past, so that had to be like really helpful that you knew who these players were. Like,
right. And I knew their rosters really well. I had seen most of those shows a number of times back in my New York days. And so it was really easy for me to jump in and help them out, especially when they were transitioning and trying to get stuff in our system and all that. So
the things that the agency group didn't have that you guys do have is your full service agency.
Yeah.
Huge film and TV division. Monster
TV, film,
company.
Reality, branded lifestyle, all that we could offer to all of our clients. And I think that that's been obviously a huge advantage for a lot of them who came over from agency group.
How does selling performing arts differ than selling rock and roll? You know both sides of the business, but you focus on the PACs and the middle of the road stuff in the theater world. That's your bread and butter.
The day-to-day, the big difference is the timing. So I'm already working on stuff for next season, which is September of 2018 through May of 2019 now. And I can say, oh, I know which weekends are available. So that's really the big difference is we're thinking really far ahead. But because I'm doing clubs and casinos and theaters, I'm trying to put the puzzle pieces together for the greater whole and sort of if we're going to play this now and here this spring, what are we going to do next year? And what are we going to do 2 years from now? And how are we going to rotate that? And how are we going to, spread the love, but also be smart about how often we're playing in a marketplace or in a certain area?
Do Broadway buyers or people buying Broadway series, or when you're putting a show on a season, these big nonprofits or grant series type of things, when a show stiffs, do those guys freak out and call for reductions and need help? Or is it just part of their season money? It doesn't matter.
I mean, I don't want to speak for every theater out there since not all are on, not all are sort of on the same system. But in general, I'm getting fewer calls than some of my colleagues for reductions or for help, or, they sort of have their little marketing machine that they're used to, their brochure, their season, and they have a built-in audience in a lot of cases. So they're pretty protected, which is good because stuff that we're playing soft ticket, we can almost play a hybrid as a theater. So
what's the most reliable, always makes money, always leaves the audience happy show that you work with? What is the best client that you're like, I can sell this to almost anyone and they're going to come out winning?
I'd say the day-to-day that I'm working on would be Air Supply, which is
consistent winner, great live show.
Great live show. They actually changed up their live show. And even though I'm seeing that 2 or 3 times a year, when I went in September, even I went away saying, wow, I saw something different that I hadn't seen before. And also the difference between rock or contemporary and what we're doing is you're very aware of what it is you're buying. So my big pitch on Air Supply could be, hey, do you want to buy an Air Supply date versus, this is my new band and here's their stats and here's their number of followers. There's a lot more information that you need to make it.
Here's an illusionist. Have you heard of him? It's Air Supply.
Right. I have a date. This is the money. It works for you. You should take it.
Yeah. Kansas and Air Supply seem like that's a pretty straightforward pitch.
It's pretty solid.
Yeah.
So
who are they? We've got Kansas.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get that.
So that part makes my job a little easy.
There's a catalog of hits. Would you like that or not?
Yeah, and I definitely sing on the phone sometimes. There's a lot of I'm all out of love jokes. So, everyone knows those hits. And even though I was born in the 80s, you feel like you're growing up with that surrounding you in the house, in the car, all of that. So I still have a connection to a lot of that stuff, even though generationally I'm one step younger than a lot of those.
Well, all their agents are dying off. They need you.
They need me.
The arts community took a big hit when the economy fell apart 7-8 years ago. Grants dried up, sponsorship dried up, things got soft, and they had smaller seasons and a lot less activity. Have you seen that come back, or have they just evolved?
I think it's come back, but I also think that a lot of them have gotten smarter. They're not that they weren't smart before, but a lot of them have gotten more proactive about the changing dynamic. The world we live in today is very internet-based and social media-based. And a lot of those, even though they're older clients, they're more Facebook clients versus Instagram clients kind of level. But they're trying to be diverse in how they're reaching out to their audiences and how they're approaching those things, how they're marketing them. So I think they're trying to evolve with the times.
So there's some Darwinism with that, where a lot of these nonprofits always ran like they didn't have to make money and didn't run like a successful business. It's our mission to bring arts to the world. We don't care about the money. Opposed to some of the bigger nonprofits like Seattle Theater Group or the Trust in Minneapolis. Like they truly run like very well run theaters and promoters. They're companies that are trying to do the best business they possibly can. And I think we're seeing an evolution towards that.
Yeah, some you might have more of an awareness of their 501c3 status, and some you work with because they're really active, like promoters are, in terms of going out there and making aggressive offers or competing for stuff in their market. So it really depends on some. It's very obvious if they're city owned and operated or subsidized, and some I almost kind of like they're like secret ninjas or something, you know, that they're operating in a for-profit world, even though they are a not-for-profit business.
As an agent, do you have any pet peeves in the industry?
There's a lot of things that I try to do because I don't like when someone does that to me. Something like answering every call or returning every email. You know, we're all backed up. We're all very busy, but I try to be very communicative with all of my buyers. And I try to answer people, even if they're reaching for something that I know might not be possible for them. I try to, you know, I don't just blow them off. I try to sort of let them down easy or try to steer them into another direction or something like that. So I try not to feel like I'm above anybody or holier than thou, because I do have a big territory with a lot of responsibility.
I always wonder, like, there's some agents that truly, I'm very honest on the phone. Like, I don't want you asking me for an offer 7 times that I know I'm not going to send. So I'm very big on, no, that's an offer I'm never going to make. Right up front, you know you're not waiting for an offer. And I know a lot of promoters don't want to say no on the phone. So they're like, yeah, the offer's coming, and it never comes, right? There's a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, the same way as I try to be a straight shooter and I try to be really honest. And I think that my buyers appreciate that I'm not doing some big dance to eventually say no or move it to the guy next down the street.
Get the no, like right off
Exactly.
the bat?
I think it's going to save all of us a lot of time and energy, and we could spend that on other things.
Any advice for people coming up in the industry?
I don't know. I think you have to go into every show and every meeting and every sort of opportunity thinking that you never know who you're going to meet. You never know who you're going to end up bumping into and talking to. So you want to sort of always be on your game and putting your best foot forward, and just stay in contact and stay communicative. And I still, even now, I try to send little follow-up emails like, hey, it was great meeting you at such and such or whatever, because you never know when that's going to come back, and you never know when that person's going to say, oh, I did remember them, and I didn't remember that I had a great interaction with her, and I do want to work with her. That might come back to you later. So you just never know.
Your industry taking you from Rhode Island to New York to LA. Is this your home forever? Have you fallen in love with LA?
I love living here. I love living in Los Angeles. I loved New York, but it can be a serious grind on your body and your soul. And I think it's a little bit of an easier lifestyle here in terms of getting space, and you can't beat the weather, obviously. So, but I don't know. I'm open to it. I mean, I'm an East Coast girl living in a West Coast world. So sometimes I'm a little too rough for everybody, and I'm a little too pushy, but that's my roots. And so you never know. Leaving that open.
Thank you so much for taking time and talking to us.
Thanks, Dan.
Noel is clearly a rising star in the industry, and stoked we finally got her on the podcast for a full interview.
This is Omar Al-Jilani from Live Nation, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
We are celebrating birthdays from August 10th to August 16, 2018.
That's Friday the 10th. Laura Kirby and Randy Hawkins of the Atmosphere Touring Crew. Shout out to Minneapolis.
Saturday, Rob Chalice, Jimmy Koplick, and Brett Mosman.
Sunday, from the Adele Touring Crew, Greg Bogart.
Monday, August 13th, wrestling superstar Jumpin' Jim Brunzell and Adam Bauer.
They're kind of the same, Jim Brunzell and Adam Bauer.
I was gonna say.
You never really see them in the same place at the same time. I'm just saying.
I hear ya.
Tuesday, August 14th, Stuart Goldberg, John Trembler, Brett Blair, John Boyle, and Peter Jest.
Wednesday, August 15th, Rob Buswell, Cass Scripps, Susie Gange, and Steve Einzig.
And Thursday, 8/16, the date solely goes to my wifey, Elodie Steinberg. Happy birthday, wife.
Aw, happy birthday, Elodie. Happy birthday to all of you from all of us at Promoter 101.
Hey, it's Jonathan Shank from Red Light Management on Promoter 101.
Feel free to write us at steiny@promoter101.net.
The quote of the week comes to us from none other than Garth Brooks. When I went to see Kansas, Queen and Styx, I don't remember the music, but I know I saw them. Kind of sums up my youth.
We'll be back next week with a brand new Promoter 101 with Vic Thomas, Bob Babish, and Scott Zeal. Plus, Martin Hopewell shares the magic that is ILMC, and a war story from CAA's Brian Hill.
We're wishing you sold-out shows for the weeks to come. And thank you so much, Jamie, for playing guest host this week. You make an awesome Luke.
Aw, my pleasure.
Hi, it's Peter Katzis. You're listening to Promoter 101.